You'd be able to go to Walmart, you'd be able to go to Kmart, you'd be able to go to Ace Hardware or such places as this and buy the most sophisticated tools that have ever existed. Power saws, band saws, planers, crowbars, steel hammers, and so on. You'd be able to go to the lumber yard and you'd be able to buy pre-cut lumber. You wouldn't have to hack your beams out of the standing trees as I assume that Noah had to do if he built such a boat as this. Do you think that you could do it? How would you undertake to do this? First of all, the notion that a man could do this 5,000 years ago fails to take into consideration that you just don't go out one day and decide that you're going to build a wooden boat 450 feet long. There is a science to shipbuilding. You have to have a knowledge of physics, you have to have a knowledge of calculus, you have to have a knowledge of architecture, you have to know something about structural analysis. How did Noah understand what kind of shear forces would be at work in this huge, gigantic flood that he has just described to us? And in a flood that would do all of the things that he presented in this scenario in his slide presentation, the Hurricane Andrew would look like just an afternoon thunderstorm in comparison. This boat was going to have to take forces that probably no ship has ever taken before. I doubt if anyone in here who has any sailing experience would find this story very believable. My wife and I, in returning from the mission field, aboard a ship got caught in a hurricane, and I can tell you that that is not a pleasant experience. And when I think back on that, I can think about a giraffe being in the ark, being slammed against the wall because we had to be strapped into our bunks to ride out the storm, because if we tried to get up, we would be slammed against the wall. So how did Noah know how to do this? Well, the fact is, friends, he couldn't have done it because it can't even be done today. And I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm going to say. And I hope that Dr. Hovine will address this issue when he comes back for his second speech. I'm going to say it again. A wooden boat 450 feet long that's seaworthy cannot be made. The longest wooden ship that was ever made at the height of the shipbuilding industry in the last 2 centuries was 377 feet long. The name of that ship was the Rochambeau. And after it was built, the builders found that when it was put into the water and they tried to sail it, that it moved with an undulating or a snaking motion that caused warping of the hull and serious leaking. They tried to correct the problem by putting straps of steel diagonally along the sides, but still they were never able to use that ship in deep water. They had to settle for short coastal hauls. The United States government from 1900 to 1909 built six masters. They were called six masters because they were equipped with 6 masts. The longest of these was the USS Wyoming that was 322 feet long. Noah's Ark, presumably, was over 100 feet longer than that. They had the same problem. Even though they tried to reinforce with the diagonal strips, they found that the undulating movement through the water caused so much warping and stress to the hull that bilge pumps had to operate continually. Now, this was at the height of the shipbuilding industry. It was precisely because of this factor that the shipbuilding industry turned to steel and abandoned wood, because they discovered that about 300 feet is a maximum length for a wood ship, and when you pass that limit, you experience the problems that I have just described to you. I hope you have paper and pencil with you, because I'm going to give you some references to check. You won't be able to check them tonight, but those of you who know Dr. Hovind, I hope you will contact him and ask him to give an explanation for this. You won't find these in your library, I'm sure, but most libraries now have a system that we call interlibrary loan. And if you ask the library through this system to get the books for you, they should be able to do it. Go and ask for a history of technology that was published by Oxford University Press. Request volume 5. Turn to page 355, and in an article entitled Shipbuilding by A.M. Robb, you will see this 300-foot limit factor discussed and verified. Also request the British shipbuilding industry from 1870 to 1914, published by Harvard University Press. In pages 13 and 14 in that book, you will see verification of this 300-foot factor for wooden ships that I'm talking about. And you can also request American Ships, written by Alexander Lang, L-A-I-N-G. He will discuss this factor, or he does discuss this factor on pages 403 to 409. And in that section, he quotes John J. Rockwell, who was the designer of the 6 masters that I talked about a moment ago, including the USS Wyoming. And Rockwell said, quote, 6 masters were not practical. They were too long for wood construction. Now, you've seen Dr. Hovind pull a stunt that is very familiar to me. I've had a lot of debates, and my opponents have done this repeatedly. They do it in just about every debate. They try to dazzle the audience with a lot of charts, with a lot of slides that they don't take the time to explain. And they want to leave the impression that they are just overwhelming the opposition with their evidence. But the book of Genesis said, and God said to Noah, you make an ark that's 450 feet long. I want him to explain to us how Noah was able to accomplish that scientifically, since the best shipbuilders that the world have ever known were not able to go beyond 300 feet and make a seaworthy vessel. You know, creationists like to talk